You're listening to episode 185 of the D6 podcast.
I don't know anything more important in our society or in the kingdom of God than to help the church, help the family.
Discipleship is not an event, it's a way of life.
And one day it just hit me that discipleship at home was not about doing more. It was about inviting Christ into what we were already doing.
The goal of family ministry is not families sitting on the couch holding hands and singing Kumbaya. The ultimate goal is families that love God, love people, and make disciples of all peoples.
So that's why you're here. You're here to say 1 hour a week, as significant and as awesome as it is, we know that it's not enough and we want to be intentional with every hour.
You're listening to the D6 podcast. Here's your hosts, Ron Hunter and Jeremy Lee.
This is the family ministry podcast that helps you connect the church and home. Hey, holidays are on their way, Ron.
That's right.
We talk about this. I love the holidays.
My wife, I think she adds Christmas decorations every year. Last season, we lined up all the Santas. She collects Santas, so I try to buy her one new Santa every year.
Yes.
We lined up all of them and took their individual pictures last year, and then we put them all on the dinner table, and she has this whole big, they're about 3 feet tall.
Wow.
All these different ones that look like they come from different countries and so forth. What's your wife? What's her favorite decoration?
Well, it's really not about my wife. It's about me, Ron.
It's about you. I'm sorry.
So, just kidding. Here's the annual discussion in our home. I look at her, and I say, when can I bring out the decorations?
Oh,
I do that.
You're more anxious than she is.
Oh, I'm that guy. Yeah,
okay.
for sure.
Yeah.
I would put them out in May if she would let me, and it's just a constant, it's like, when can I, like September, is it time? October, no. And, and the day that she looks at me and says, let's do it, it's like the happiest
when do you typically
day ever.
do it?
If she had her way, it would be the day after Thanksgiving, no later. But there have been a few years where I slide it in earlier.
Okay.
Oh,
so
yeah.
no earlier for her is her preference then.
So we're getting very close to Christmas tree time. Because to me, if you're going to do it, just do it and enjoy it.
Well,
I love it.
It's time then. Yeah, absolutely.
Are you real or fake Christmas tree guy?
Oh, good question. We have been both. Well, I don't have a strong preference either way. But we have had a really nice fake one that everybody thinks is real. So I feel like we've done pretty well with that.
Oh,
yeah.
Okay. Yes, we have tried real, and after a whole holiday season of sneezing and coughing,
You're going back. Oh, yes.
We're all
there's
fake.
There's some, yeah. How about this? Have you ever taken a real one and you set it out, let it dry and die, and then kind of shake it and get off all the needles, and then paint it white and put it out in your yard the next year? Have you ever done that?
No.
We haven't either, but our neighbors have. And they look really cool, so they've collected them over the years and they keep preserving. I don't know how they do that, but there's these it looks like a bare dead tree, but you spray paint it white and then you put lights on it, and it's pretty cool looking. Oh,
the lights make a little more sense.
Yeah,
like dead white trees.
Yeah,
don't. That's weird.
No. Yeah, I probably didn't say it right.
Okay, hey, one of the reasons I'm bringing this up is because I want to talk today, because last year you guys released a Christmas Advent guide, and are you guys bringing it out again?
We
this year?
are bringing it out. In fact, we're getting down to the end, because last year we were shocked. They sold out. I forget how quick. It was like days.
Yeah,
and we had to go back to print, and we reprinted and sold out again. So
that is
this
why
year
I'm mentioning it.
We want people to get in and take advantage of this resource, because with all the resources we do, it's always family oriented.
Yeah. So please go to d6family.com if you want to jump and get it before it sells out again. All right. So today's guest is Caylin Moore. And David David Jones, part of our podcast team. He did such a great job with this interview, and I would say that even if you weren't sitting right next to me, David. But you started out by saying when you did your interview on Good Morning America, and I was like, oh, so this is this guy is super. I was really interested. Caylin, tell us more about, what do you know about Caylin?
What I learned was from David's interview. I mean, I had heard about him, but I mean, when I listened to this interview, I was blown away by a mom who took time to really emphasize, that education and that importance of that dignity side, that, improvement and the goals. And she really instilled something in her son that he has carried forward generationally. And I love the fact that he didn't take himself too seriously and was willing. I think he said the words, I went from, being really doing very well to back down to the bottom to back up and back down. And he said it took going through those experiences to really gain the perspective of where he was.
Yeah, Caylin went on a journey from abject poverty to becoming a Rhodes Scholar, and he kind of talks through that process. Early on in his life, and this is the part that sticks out to me, and then we'll just we won't continue to steal thunder, but this is the part I want you guys to listen for. He went from a middle-class neighborhood to poverty, and he talked about the kids in the middle-class neighborhood were dreaming of success and things like that, and the kids in the in Compton were dreaming of, at 6 years old, when I go to jail one day, I'm going to join this gang, or I'm going to do
be
this.
Muslim or whatever. Yes.
Incredible thought that is, and it just reminded me that when we're surviving, we're not free to dream.
Yeah,
and
that's right.
How incredible to remember. And Caylin, thank you for being with us, and we can't wait to share your interview with our audience. So after the break, we'll be hearing from Caylin Moore, the author of the book A Dream Too Big. And thanks again to David Jones for this interview.
We have a special treat for you on today's D6 podcast. This is an interview you'll want to listen to with the whole family. Joining me today is Caylin Moore. Now, Caylin is no ordinary person. You've seen the Straight Outta Compton shirts? Well, Caylin can wear one without any irony. Caylin went from growing up in Compton to being a college student and football player to being a Rhodes Scholar and studying at Oxford. He's a husband, a father, and he's the author of the new book, A Dream Too Big, the story of an improbable journey from Compton to Oxford. And oh yeah, he's only 25. Caylin, thank you so much for joining us today.
Absolutely. My pleasure. Thank you for having me today.
Well, Caylin, your story is so incredible that it's almost unbelievable. They don't really make movies this wild, and I hope your movie does get made someday. Take us back to the beginning. What was your childhood like?
Sure. So growing up, I started off in a fairly sheltered, middle class life, 2-parent household. My parents were married for 9 years. And as a result, of domestic violence, not physical violence, but, the verbal violence, the emotional abuse, my parents ended up becoming divorced. So this, caused a drastic change in my life where we went from, a majority, pretty affluent town to moving to the borderline of Compton and Carson to my grandmother's house. So I remember, just seeing a stark contrast, right away. I remember one of my first experiences at 6 years old in first grade on the schoolyard. I was talking to 2 young boys, and one of the boys says, they were just talking, just chopping it up. And one of the kids said, one day when I go to prison, I'm going to become a Crip automatically. And then another young boy said, when I go to prison one day, I'm going to pretend to be a Muslim. I heard they don't mess with you if you're religious. And then it came my turn to say what I would do when I went to prison one day. And I didn't have anything to say. Up to that point, at 6 years old, I had never envisioned myself going to prison. So you can just see the stark contrast from these, environments. One environment is very sheltered, very well funded, and policy decisions are made that seem to be building the community up. And then when I moved to Compton, I see the exact opposite of children the exact same ages that want to, they want to do big things too, but the reality is just much different. It was crazy.
Yeah, and in the book you talk about laying in bed at night and you were with other people because you didn't have your own bed, and hearing gunshots and cockroaches in the wall, going to bed hungry. What was that all kind of like? That's something that I think a lot of people today can't relate to. So what was that like for you to kind of come from that environment and have to deal with that on a daily basis?
I think you make a really good point, because sometimes when we think about, poverty, we think about, flies and bloated bellies. We think about, third world countries, where I think I think a lot of people probably don't realize that there's actually poverty that exists, in our backyard. And I was one of the people that endured, seemingly the worst of it. Growing up, I think I remember we used to go outside and, have to fill up a bucket of water, bring the bucket back inside the house and microwave some of the water and then take a wash up because I wasn't strong enough to turn the faucet with the pliers that you had to put on the handle. And, just in general, the bathtub, things were always broken, things didn't work. As you said, it was those rats and those roaches. I think we at a point in time, from the age 6 all the way to the age 13. So from first grade to 8th grade, I shared a bed with 3 other people. So anytime one person moves, you wake up, or anytime your little brother wets the bed, you go to school smelling like you wet the bed. And it was just, it's embarrassing. Growing up poor, it's just, it does something to your spirit. It's damaging almost. I remember just being embarrassed. Kids, you make friends, and you go to your friend's house and they ask, can we come to play at yours? And you make excuses and things like that.
Wow, yeah, that's tough. I've got to bring up your mom because reading through your book, it's obvious that your mom is a superhero.
Wow.
Even in hard times, how did your mom make sure that you and your siblings were headed down the right path, both spiritually and educationally?
That's a great question. For my mom, she was two of the biggest things that she always focused on were faith and education. So even after, as I said, after a marriage of 9 years, that ends in divorce and ends in you having to flee, to seemingly worse circumstance and poverty, my mom was a fighter. She was super strong in her faith and super strong in her will to see a better life for her children. So during this first grade year that I talk about, where things changed dramatically, my mom graduated from law school. As a recent single mother with 3 children, graduated from law school, and that's just a certain mindset where it's saying, we may live in the hood, but the things that go on in the hood are the things that that happen here, they won't live in us. So she always had this mindset, kind of to dream big and to see, beyond our circumstances. So a lot of that, I'm very blessed to say I adopted, that positive outlook, and I adopted, those skill sets. I adopted that response to adversity, and I adopted, that faith from my mother.
Yeah, I love that quote that your mom had about that you just mentioned about living in the hood, but that doesn't mean the hood has to live in you. Uh,
Precisely.
yeah, you had temptations all around you, gang activity. You mentioned poverty. How are you able to stay focused on the ultimate goal and pursue God's plan for you, even as a middle schooler and high schooler?
Man, to be honest, I struggle to answer that question now. And the reason why I say that, I would like to say that, I just worked hard and I was focused and I just stayed away from all those things. But who's to say I couldn't have got caught in the crossfire of a bullet that didn't have my name on it?
Hmm.
Who's to say that I couldn't have accidentally been handed a backpack and trafficked, a drug unknowingly and then got arrested for that? It's so many different things that are out of my control to where I must sit back and say I'm incredibly blessed to have, been a survivor from this type of war zone environment and be able to live to tell the tale to hopefully inspire other people to do something about it. But I would say a lot of it, just on a personal level, it was just that faith or that understanding that, there has to be something better than this. I had to believe, my faith in God didn't come from tradition necessarily. It came from absolute necessity. I
Hmm.
was convinced at an early age that God was something that I needed, that was a necessity. I thirsted for that living water, so to speak, and it's just something that carried me through on that day to day. When you're waking up when you're 16 years old and you wake up at 5 a.m. To go ride a bicycle all the way to your gym in Compton, or to go run the bleachers at Compton College, and you wake up at 5 a.m. because that's the only time that gang activity is dormant, and you assume all the gang members must be asleep. So you won't get into any trouble on your way to that gym. These are the times where your faith gets strong and your sense of purpose and your sense of meaning for what you want to do, gets incredibly strong. But even given those things, if I had to be honest with myself, I don't know if I could go back at the age of 6 and do it all again and become a Rhodes Scholar again.
Hmm.
Because even though my dreams were too big, there were dreams that almost didn't come true for circumstances that were outside of my own control.
Oh, wow. Yeah, and I know with some of those circumstances, You talk about mentors in your life and how those people helped you out. That word mentor is something I notice in your book often.
Mhm.
Your father didn't play an active role in your life for much of your childhood, but you did have those coaches and those advisors that did. As someone who I know works as a mentor now, why is it so important for men to fill in those gaps and to mentor younger men?
It's incredibly important. And I think perhaps society doesn't have a full grasp on the importance of mentorship. It's something that's pivotal. How can you be what you cannot see? That there's a certain level of modeling that, as it pertains to manhood, as it pertains to respect for self, respect for others, that needs to be shown to you. It's not necessarily innate where you just naturally just get it. And a lot of times, those males in my life, and I had females too, by the way, that were positive mentors. But I speak specifically to the males because I'm a male, so naturally I would gravitate more towards them. You want to see yourself in that person. They were incredibly important. Just showing me different things, giving me a positive outlook on life, how to treat yourself, how to treat others. I had so many different, male mentors that I physically knew, and male mentors that I saw from afar that were accomplishing things and doing things that I wanted to one day achieve. So I say it's incredibly important, particularly in situations that are more volatile, such as mine.
Yeah, and you've come full circle going from being the one mentored to now you are mentoring others. Can you tell us about Spark, which is just something so incredible that you've done?
Absolutely. So when we started Spark, this was, let me think, about 3 or 4 years ago from now. It was myself and a couple of teammates. And our idea was that, we just won like a big bowl game against Oregon. And, we can use the status from the game to maybe get a free burger or maybe get, maybe get a phone number or something like that, right? But instead of using it for things that are, essentially meaningless, we thought critically, how do we want to use this to build up our own community, that are the community that's the most immediate to us. So we're living in Fort Worth. That's where Texas Christian University is. And it's a stark contrast between what you see on our campus and what you see off the campus. I think that the demarcation of poverty is a street called Berry Street. So the wealthy part of Berry Street is called West Berry, and then right when it hits the train tracks, it's East Berry Street. And I remember there was an elementary school in that area that we ended up speaking to. And in that elementary school, I'm going to describe it. You have the elementary school on one side, and then in between the elementary school, or right down the block, you have a prison. And then on the other side of the prison, you have a high school.
Oh, wow.
What do you think that does to your psyche as a child, right? To where you see a prison, in between you and your high school. So that's almost to say that's middle school right there. At some point, I'll be in that prison. So what we did is we would go to schools like that and we would speak life into a dying situation.
Wow, that is very impressive. Um, I want to talk about your dad for a second. He's
Hmm.
currently in prison serving 52 years to life.
Hmm.
In a lot of cases, that would be the end of a story for a person, but you didn't let it be. Why did you decide to reconnect with your father?
I would credit that to the incredible power of forgiveness. I think it humbled me to say that, I want to be this type of man, I want to be that type of man, but I can't even forgive my own father and move forward in that relationship. So I thought really heavy about those things and the type of person I wanted to be and how I wanted to, do better in the next generation and do better, as a father and so on and so forth. So, it prompted me to reach out and to rekindle that flame. And from doing that, I learned so much in the process about myself. And ultimately, I learned a lot about my father. There's so many different, demons that people are battling with and dealing with that you never even know. And I think a lot of people could probably relate to that. A lot of people, they know that their dad turned to the bottle, but they don't know why. They know that their dad did a certain thing, but they don't know why. And then it comes full circle when you realize, wow, I see how your dad treated you, or your stepdad treated you, or how you were treated or abused. And I started to learn these things about my dad. It gave me a certain level of empathy and understanding, not to look his transgressions, but it gave me a certain level of context and empathy to understand how I can move forward in a different direction.
That's really powerful. Now, I mean, we could probably talk for 6 hours, not even cover a little small percentage of your story. People need to go buy the book. If you're listening, you need to read the book. Tell us, though, how does one go from college football player and student to janitor to Rhodes Scholar?
Wow. That is profound. For me, it was all part of my, my development and my journey of where God needed to take me. He needed to take me from the top. He needed to take me from the top back to the bottom, back to the top, back to the bottom, and then back to the top again, in order for me to develop into the, the holistic type person that I am now. So going to, first I went to a university out in Poughkeepsie, New York. And then I ended up injuring my back, right when we're in the heat of me battling it out for a starting position. And I became incredibly depressed. So as a result, I motivated myself and I said, you know what? Instead of being down, instead of being sad about this, I want to set some very high goals that encourage me, one, to heal up my back and to dream about a better tomorrow. The same things I learned from my mother. So essentially what I did is I wrote on a piece of paper, Division I football player and Harvard PhD. At the time, I was neither of those two things and didn't know where Harvard was or really what a PhD entailed. So I write down these goals, and my idea was that, I need to get a job because I'm gonna catch a plane and I'm gonna go somewhere else and go to a new school and start over, and I'm gonna heal up. So I convinced myself that I needed a job. The only available job at the time was a desk assistant job, in the janitorial services place. I went there. I ended up getting demoted to being a janitor, and it was humbling. Not in the sense of I'm too good for manual labor. I've done much manual labor in my life. It was humbling in the sense that now you're at the dining hall and the same classmates and teammates that you were cool with before. Now they're treating you disrespectfully or throwing something on the floor for you to clean up, or you're cleaning up their vomit after a night out on the town. It's just incredibly humbling. And I just made it up in my mind one day that these titles that society may hoist on me, they won't define me ultimately. And if it is my job to be a janitor, I'll be the best janitor that ever lived. So that same mindset, I guess, that I applied to being a janitor, or I call myself a janitorial services technician. I made a business card and everything. Like I'm
awesome.
I'm a little bit different, but as I was a janitorial services technician, I started just having these big dreams and these different ideas. I started applying to programs. I ended up, getting back surgery, wound up at TCU. And then when the opportunity, arose, playing football at TCU, founding an organization, and then, by the grace of God, I was able to apply to the Rhodes Scholarship, was able to have, top grades and top credentials. And, glory be to God, I was able to win.
And can you tell us a little bit about what it means to be a Rhodes Scholar? Because this is a big deal. For those that may not be familiar, this is a huge, huge deal. It's not just something that they hand out like candy. Can you talk about like how exclusive this club is and what it means?
Sure, absolutely. At least what they say is that it's, the most prestigious and difficult to obtain scholarship in the world. Just some of the past recipients, it's a long list. You have Susan Rice, you have Cory Booker, Pete Buttigieg, Bill Clinton, George Stephanopoulos, all types. What's her name? Rachel Maddow. Many different influential people, in business and politics, all these things. Basically, what a Rhodes Scholarship is, it's an opportunity to study at the University of Oxford, and you're in competition with the elite of the country. And I mean that in in a descriptive sense, and I guess in a pejorative sense as well, of like the wealthy elite, the students at the Harvards, the Yales, the any elite school that you can imagine, and they're competing it out. People that have found cures for things, people that have started NGOs in foreign countries, and that's kind of the competition pool, very elite group. And so pretty much what it does is it affords you an opportunity to study, for your master's or your PhD or whatever it is that you're interested in at the University of Oxford. And it's just a life-changing opportunity, at least, just to be, introduced into, an elite fraternity at the #1 university in the world. Is just an incredible, door opener, an incredible pathway. And there's a weight to it as well because of the history of, who Cecil Rhodes is. Cecil Rhodes, the individual that started the scholarship, he was actually, an avowed white supremacist, and he wanted the scholarship to only go to people that looked exactly like him to continue, a mission of imperialism and colonialism. After a while, you start seeing people of different backgrounds, different ethnicities, so forth, that ended up earning the scholarship. So now, people like me redefine what the Rhodes Scholarship is.
That is so amazing. That is such a cool story. You've always dreamed big. You talk about that in your book in the beginning and the end and all throughout, that you have always been dreaming big. Here you sit as a Rhodes Scholar. You're a husband. You're a father. Just a few weeks ago, you were being interviewed by Michael Strahan on Good Morning America. Are you at all surprised that you're here?
Wow, that's a profound question, to be honest. I think, I always had big dreams, and my mom had a certain level of expectations for us and things like that. I think hopefully I was in my heart, I was like, I had a mindset where I wanted to be successful. I wanted to do something. I wanted to help. I wanted to make changes. But I must be honest, as sometimes it seemed incredibly unrealistic when you have, helicopters flying. I remember being at football practice in high school. I went to high school in Watts, which is a section of South Central. And in high school, I remember, I played quarterback then. And I remember, we're making calls and we had to develop certain signals, to message to different receivers because you can't always hear over the hum of helicopters that are flying over the practice field,
Wow.
looking for people. So if that's your day-to-day environment, sometimes I have to admit, you start thinking in more of a survival mode. I pray that I make it to 18. So things beyond that, sometimes you don't think about those things. So I hate to admit it, but sometimes it seemed incredibly unlikely that I would be, in a position where I am now.
Wow, yeah. And I know you have a heart for kids and teenagers. What word of encouragement and wisdom would you offer to those kids and teenagers who are listening to this today?
The encouragement that I would offer to them is very simple, and I heard it from a man outside of a restaurant one day in Poughkeepsie, New York, during the snow. He said, "To thine own self be true," and I know what he meant by that. What he was talking about was the idea of not feeling like you have to live up to other people's expectations of you or to fit in with the crowd or do what your friends are doing. Even if it goes against your own morals and your own stances. Be true to yourself. And that means spending time with yourself, really thinking about what type of person you want to be, what type of person God would have you to be, and just being true to that. And I think if you do that, at the end of the day, you'll be proud of yourself. You'll be very, very thankful that you didn't just fall in with the crowd. That's what I would say to teenagers because, you're at a time where you're particularly, vulnerable to influence. So I would say, be that type of person that's not afraid to, be the only one in whatever it is.
Well, I want to end on this question here, these two questions. What is God doing in your life right now, and what's next for you?
Oh, great question. For me right now, God is doing amazing things in my life. Every day I'm being humbled by the opportunity, to sit down and see my daughter develop, to just the other day, she's 11 months old now. What God is doing in my life is allowing me to watch miracles. Me and my wife were just sitting here, just randomly. We're in the same place at the same time in the middle of the day. Like I just came back for something, and my daughter just stood up and just took 6 steps. That's what God is doing. He's allowing me to see miracles, just to see the beautiful things that a lot of times in life people never really slow down to be able to enjoy. And I'm very privileged and very humbled to be able to enjoy just beautiful little moments like that. So I would say that's one of the things. And then for the things that I'm looking to do next, I'm actually really excited to become a professor. In the fall, I'll be applying to PhD programs at, schools like Harvard, Yale, Princeton, so forth, and Brown. And my goal is to apply to PhD programs in sociology. I want to research, a lot of the issues that I talk about, pertaining to poverty and racial things and things that go on in my community, and hopefully find solutions to ameliorate these things. So that's my hope, immediately, is to become a professor. That's one of the things I'm excited about now.
Well, Caylin, in the beginning of the book, you say, I wanted one day to know how it feels to have changed the world. Well, sir, I believe you've done it, and I believe you're only getting started.
Wow. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for what you're doing. Thank you for your testimony. Thank you for your book. I know for a fact you're changing a lot of lives. And for our listeners out there, Kaylin's book is available right now. It's called A Dream Too Big, the story of an improbable journey from Compton to Harvard. It's available on Amazon. It is available in Barnes & Noble sometimes, but I've been seeing it sell out quite a bit, so you may want to try to get your hands on that. But Caylin, thank you so much for joining us today.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me, and thank you for your kind words.
Hey, I love so much about this, and you guys said in the interview, David said in the interview that this should be a movie. I completely echo and agree.
Yeah.
There on opening night.
And it needs to focus on he and his mom in this, and then have that foreshadowing of what he's doing with his kids to instill that yet again in that third generation. That's what I'd love to see out of this.
One of the values of the podcast that I love is that we try to be transferable to ministers and to parents, but also to ministers. And there's really not too many ministers out there who don't have a kid or two.
That's right.
That are living this scenario. And I think it was so amazing for us to sit for a second and hear the perspective of what they actually lived through.
Yeah.
I think we have to think in our churches, not just about diversity in race or in gender or in other things. Economic diversity is important to consider as well. And not a lot of us spend a lot of time thinking about that. But, I sat through a training one time that has always stuck with me about upper class, middle class, and those that are in poverty. And they in general really do value three different things. Middle class really values achievement. And as someone who's kind of in that class, it's true. I'm always wanting my boys to achieve, and I want to achieve. The upper class, they're sitting with newspapers at the table, and they understand that to be able to stay in their class, they have to appreciate education and those kind of things. But those in poverty, they appreciate recreation and just spending time together and kind of escaping their problems just together.
Correct.
That was amazing for me to understand what they value. And so I thank you for Caylin for giving us a kind of a glimpse into that.
That's right. And I think the other item is to continue to think through, what did your parents value that you took away from growing up? Mm-hmm. And then ask yourself, what will your kids think you valued?
Yes.
Just make sure that your kids know what you value.
Mm. And then just the message of empathy. His dad being in prison and just the fact that he was willing to face and forgive that moment so that he could get to that place of not excusing but having empathy. Really great way to explain that. So again,
I think you guys need to go read his book. There's no way around that. A Dream Too Big. Don't forget that. That might be a good reading through the holidays.
So in next week's episode, we will have Dan Darling. And I'll save my thoughts about Dan for our episode, but it was, he has a really cool book on the topic of dignity. Interesting thoughts and interesting person. You guys will enjoy it next week. Hope you guys will be back with us. Thanks again for listening. We always appreciate it. And I hope you guys have a great week of ministry.
You've been listening to the D6 Podcast. You can learn more about D6 at d6family.com.